Welcome to today's class. We start a new subject called Manage Personal Stresses in the Work Environment, which I think is quite timely considering a lot of you are struggling with the experiencing the workload of this subject, this course, and managing your own time and emotions through that. So where we talk about managing stresses in the work environment, the management tips and tools that you put in place are very relevant for you to put in place in your personal life as well. And you should have stress management tools and processes in all aspects of your life. They don't always come front of mind, and it can be very easy to react emotionally to things when we're tired, when we've got a lot going on. But it's important to keep coming back to, how do I remain calm in a situation? How do I work through the stressful feelings that I'm having, and so on. Would anyone like to acknowledge or welcome us into this learning space tonight? Okay, I will. I would like to acknowledge the Dharawal people and the lands that I'm meeting on this evening, and acknowledge the wonderful lands that you all are joining in from around the country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome Aboriginal colleagues joining us here. A question for anyone that wants to answer. What is stress? What do you understand stress to be?
It's kind of like a buildup of emotions around, I don't know, what's going on in your life. Maybe it can be a bit overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, buildup of emotions because of things going on in life. Yep. What else?
The feeling of not being able to complete everything. Workload. So, yeah.
Yeah, feeling sometimes maybe overwhelmed and
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
like there's a lot happening. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, stress is common, and it is a normal physical response, particularly to challenging or new situations. When we are comfortable, when we know what's happening, our body generally doesn't produce a stress response. So stress can be good and stress can be unhelpful, and it has both mental and physical aspects to it. So when you're stressed, your body releases stress hormones, one of these being adrenaline, and this brings on physical changes in your body, which help you respond to that stressful situation. Has anyone competed in a sporting event? It could be a 100-meter run. It could be an AFL game. Has anyone competed, played sport?
I did when I was younger.
Yeah. What sport did you play, Kel?
Netball.
Netball, wonderful. And I'm guessing you enjoyed it?
Yeah, I did enjoy it very much. I was the smallest, but I was the one in centre.
Oh, excellent. Great position.
Lots of running around.
Yeah. So before each game, or maybe before a big game like a semi-final or a final, did you feel your body go through any
adrenaline rush?
Yeah.
I think so, from what I,
Yeah.
scarcely remember, but yeah.
And kids experience this differently. And there's young people, teenagers haven't really developed the fear and the unknown and the risk factors yet of life. Not that sport is all that risky and that things could go wrong, but it's just not there. So the nervousness that might come on, the stress response may not be there for kids. entirely, but it does happen. People who are about to run a big race will feel a little bit nervous, maybe sweat a little bit more, maybe have a little bit of the shakes. I know a colleague of mine, before he presents to a large group of people, he has a nervousness throw up in the bathroom, and then he's fine. And he's an excellent presenter, and you can't tell at all that he's nervous. But he has that to kind of calm himself down and go on with work. So when we're presented with what's deemed stressful situations, our body will go through this process. It will release adrenaline, and our body will try and combat that. We'll all feel stressed at different times, and how everyone experiences it will be different. And you knowing when you might be stressed, what stress typically looks like for you, will help you manage in stressful situations. So this is a requirement or a prerequisite before you go into a stressful situation. Stressful situations aren't always planned. That's why it's helpful to look at a stress management plan well ahead of time. And you're going to try and create one or write some things down for yourselves tonight as well. So when we experience stress, our body enters a fight or a flight response. Does anyone know this? Fight, flight? Have you heard this kind of term before? Yeah, great. So this response is the body gearing up for, what do I need to do in this situation? It is trying to adapt and respond to danger. Our body, our mind is constantly figuring out, are we safe? And if I'm not safe, how do I fix it so I can be safe? Whether that be physically safe or psychologically safe. And so your body releases these hormones to alert the body to go, something's off. We need to figure it out. This stress to kind of appraise, figure out your environment. Are you safe? Do you need to be stressed? Do you need to be nervous? What's going on? Is normal and good because your body's working the way it should. It's when two things, when that stress stays for a long time and you stay in a heightened state, and also if you are entering that fight or flight response to something that doesn't necessarily need a fight or flight response. And typically when you're in that situation, or a person's in that situation, it can be because of past trauma, it can be because of past experiences. So in that moment, the brain is going, oh, I've seen this before and I need to apply the same problem solving, which is the sweating, the nervousness, and the running away, or the fighting, whatever it was. But the situation could be totally different. But that's the brain trying to figure out and keep itself safe. So stress is fine. Stress can be healthy. Stress can be helpful. You might have a work demand, a work deadline, and the boss says, I need this by 5 p.m. Friday. If you're not stressed about that, fantastic. But most people will be, because there's a deadline to this task. And so you'll go through this stress response. Your heart will race, your blood pressure will elevate. You might get a little shaky, you might get a little sweaty. It might be very small signs to indicate you might be stressed. And maybe no one else sees this, and that's okay. And you probably don't want anyone else to see this. But when you're stressed, it's because you're thinking about something, and it can be important, like the deadline. Where it isn't helpful, as I mentioned, is if that stress response stays for a long time, or you're feeling quite stressed in a situation that doesn't need that response. So in terms of managing stress in the workplace, we're going to encounter stressful situations. It's just a given for the work environment. You are going to be working with vulnerable people. You're going to be working with people that require assistance. And so recognizing that stress will happen is important. Don't expect it. Don't wait for it, because you might be on hyper alert or hyper vigilant. but know that it will happen at some point, and that's okay. It's how you work through it. So we might have stressors come up when there's pressures, expectations, demands, tasks. And I talked about how this might affect the body. We can have positive symptoms that indicate or lead us towards making change or meeting a deadline or a task. And we could have negative symptoms that might pull us away from doing that. Sometimes really, let's say we have the deadline and that really stressful situation, I may not meet the deadline because I'm panicking and I'm overthinking the task. So these are some indications of stress: anxiety and worry, irritability, low self-esteem, sleeping problems, and sweating. Now you could apply this list to a lot of things. So these are not solely owned by being stressed. And they could come and go. And it's healthy for them to come and go versus staying or not being there at all. Because if we don't have any stress, we don't necessarily have that motivation or that drive or that push to complete things or achieve things. We might have a loss of appetite. We might have difficulty concentrating. We might be acting unreasonably or out of character, and we might have headaches. Things like the change in behavior may not necessarily be obvious to you. Other people will notice this, and other people may tell you or may not. But you will feel things in yourself. A person might experience high blood pressure, heart concerns, and depression, and these are on the severe side of the spectrum of stress, and when stress isn't managed well. People might take up smoking, or might take up excessive eating, or might reduce their physical activity in managing stress. There's likely to be a wide range of health concerns. And it is important to recognize these signs because we need to help them. So, some aspects or areas or situations where you might recognize the stress. It might be certain situations or tasks. It might be certain locations. It could be certain people. It could be work hours. It could be certain emotions that come up. Before we go into this is where we're going to have a look at our own stress management plans. Now, I'm going to pop a link in the chat. Okay, that's just a link to some information about what a stress management plan is. That's not the only website. That's not an exhaustive list. I'm going to get you to work on your own plan now, and it will take some research on your part. So start with that link, look at other things, start to think about what's relevant for you. So I want you to write down or type out a complete or the start of a stress management plan for yourselves. You're only going to be doing this individually. We'll keep you all here, and you're going to work on that for yourself. So I want you to think about things in your workplace currently or in your life currently that might be a little bit stressful or a lot stressful, and how you might deal with that. So think about what we call triggers, or things that bring about stress or emotions or behaviors. How you typically respond to those things now. Think about what you can control and what you can't control. So you can control you, what you say, what you do. Can't control what other people say and do. Think about your thoughts. Think about what's helpful or not helpful Our thoughts are not facts and they're not necessarily all true. Again, our brain is trying to protect us. And think about self-care activities and what you can do for you to manage that. That could be journaling. That could be physical activity. That could be catching up with friends, whatever self-care is for you. So I want you to write or type this self-management plan for you in terms of stress. So think about your life currently and what would be helpful for you. You probably need to do some research, do that. I'm going to ask if you want to share some aspects when we come back together. Does that make sense? Cool. All right. Stay in here. Feel free to leave your cameras on, turn them off. I'll turn them off. And so you have that space for you. I'll turn mine off. And then I'll check in periodically how you're going. But I want you to think about this and write or type some things down, because I really would like you to carry this through work, life, whatever you speak about in your plan. All right, I'll leave you to it. So just a recap of the stress, or the types of stress, levels of stress we can have. We can have low, moderate, acute stress. You will often see clients in this acute stress phase. We'll talk about in another subject what crisis is and how do we work through crisis and how do we assess, is it crisis or are we overthinking things or putting a lot of weight to something that maybe doesn't need to be there for lots of reasons. But we don't want low stress to progress to moderate stress, to progress to acute stress. We want to try and nip it in the bud. We want to try and stay in that low stress. A lot of things cause stress. Being in traffic, being late to something, the thought of being late to something, all of the role plays you have to do. A lot of things can cause stress. Like I said, stress can be good, and stress is itself neither good nor bad, but it can be very helpful to drive us to do things. And it might recognize to us that if we're feeling stressed, it might be important to us. But using a stress management plan, however that looks for you and however or wherever you keep it, maybe it's on a computer, maybe it's on a piece of paper you have in your bag or your pocket every day, and you refer to it, or eventually it gets stuck in your head, or it's stuck on the wall above your computer, whatever it is. It's really important to keep thinking about how can I reduce my stress or prevent stress or minimize the stress. Now, you might get a deadline thrown at you by your boss, and that would be like, whoa, I didn't have this on my radar today or this week, but here it is now. And that's okay. How are you going to manage? How are you going to work through it? And as I say, we need to think about these before the stressful situation. We don't know what or when stress will occur, but it will. You will be stressed over things. So for me, traffic is a big stressor. So I think about what is in my circle of control and what is in my circle of influence. What can I control? What can't I control? I can control me in this vehicle, the music or the podcast that I have on, and that's about it, and my actual physical driving. But in terms of getting the lights to change, getting people to move, getting traffic to move, can't do anything about it. Is there another way I could take? Maybe. Sometimes no. So what can I do in the moment as my stress management plan to work through how I'm going to get through this situation? If I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. It's out of my control. Could I have left earlier? Probably not. Did this accident just happen? Probably yes. Whatever it is, we don't want to place blame in these situations. We just want to move through them. So how are we going to move through them? How are we going to keep ourselves calm and get to where we're going safely, or do what we need to do in a timely manner, or speak about what we need to speak about without being rude or aggressive, or not running away either, because that probably isn't helpful. So, harassment, discriminative or bullying behavior are quite likely to cause stress. Discrimination is illegal, and it is negative, and it can come about, someone can be discriminated against because of their gender, because of their race, because of the color of their skin, because of the language they speak, because of their education status, because of their geographical location. People can be discriminated for a bunch of things. Is it right? No. Is it legal? No. But it does happen in the workplace. It does happen in life. It happens in the schoolyard. But if you feel like you are being discriminated against, there are actions you can take in your workplace to work through that. And that's usually contacting a manager, a HR representative, a safety representative, depending on what's relevant in your workplace. Bullying is any unreasonable behavior that causes harm to a person. Discrimination and bullying is harmful, it's unjust, it causes psychological as well as physical harm. It is a risk to someone's health and well-being. It is a risk to their performance. It is a risk to their social and personal relationships and professional relationships. It is a risk to them in workplace, at home. Again, with bullying, this is illegal. This is not right. There are steps you can take to support someone who might be experiencing bullying or discrimination or harassment in the workplace. Some of the behaviors under bullying include victimization, humiliation, intimidation, threatening. This could be physically or verbally. Putting someone under intentional pressure, deliberately excluding people from work events or work tasks. These are part of discrimination and bullying. Bullying may not have an obvious reason like discrimination. So if I'm discriminating someone based off something, bullying may not necessarily be based off something. It likely is, but it's not always there or not always seen. Bullying and harassment can damage a person's self-esteem. People can start to believe what is being said or done about them to them. We talked about gaslighting a couple of weeks ago. That is a form of bullying. And as part of this, someone might start to believe what is being said to them or about them. It can lead to fear for that worker or employee being in the workplace, and also long-term anxiety and stress and fear for wanting to be in that workplace or any workplace at all. I talked about before, sometimes stress can come about and you might enter that fight or flight response, but it doesn't need to be there necessarily for that situation. This could be someone that's left an unhealthy workplace, has gone to a new workplace, and someone might raise their voice, maybe not to that person, maybe not necessarily aggressively, maybe not necessarily about someone, but just hearing that might trigger or might represent a past experience for that person. And that can cause someone to feel unsafe and go through all those stress responses. People don't want to be in a workplace that where bullying is occurring, and people don't want to be bullying. And I'd like to think people don't want to be a bullier. Some people don't realize their behavior is bullying. Some people do. But it needs to be checked out and it needs to be noted. It's not about calling a public forum and stoning someone because they're bullying. Again, someone may not know the extent of their actions or their words. That's not to say it's right, but we need to understand, why is someone engaging in this discriminatory or bullying behavior? People have access to employee assistance programs within the workplace. It might be encouraging to see a general practitioner. It might be encouraging to get a referral for a psychologist, to join other support groups, whether online or in person. But there are lots of ways to self-deal with bullying or discriminatory behavior, I guess treatment approaches or proactive strategies to work through it. We don't know if or when discrimination or bullying might occur. There might be signs leading to it, signs in different behaviors or actions or words spoken by people, but we may not necessarily see that behavior come on. But it's important to understand what bullying may look like and how it might make a person feel, so that if you experience this yourself or you see a colleague experiencing this, you can do something about it. Now, just like unhelpful behaviors in a friendship, in an intimate relationship, sometimes we say, oh, they're just having a bad day. They didn't mean it. That's not usually them. Maybe so. Maybe those things are true, but the behaviors are not okay. We all have bad days. It doesn't mean we all go and yell at people. So having bad days, having negative thoughts, having negative feelings, having unhelpful thoughts and feelings, they happen. That's okay. It's what we do about it and how we deal with it, and then what we pass on to other people. Some other stresses that I've touched on that can occur in the workplace: excessive hours. Our bodies are actually made to have 2 sleeps a day, the generally speaking 8 hours of an evening and also an afternoon nap. In Europe and in Latin America, they're doing this wonderfully. Here, not so much, or maybe you are, which I commend you for. But the body is actually wired to have 2 sleeps a day. This is why you will find yourself in a bit of a slump after lunch. Sometimes it's the pasta that you might have had, but it can be because the body is wired to have another rest in the afternoon. But if you are working excessive hours, now I work 2 jobs. I work a full-time job and I work this job and I study. Would I say I work excessive hours? Well, I work more than the average person, but it's manageable for me. And when it doesn't become manageable for me, then I make some changes, take a break, have some extra rest, whatever it might be. But if someone is imposing excessive hours on you, you must stay back, you must work through your lunch break, you must work on the weekend, you can't go until this report is filled in, and so on. Now, sometimes this happens, and it might happen because you have a lot to do and you need to put things in tomorrow by Monday, whatever the case is. I'm not saying this is right or should happen, but sometimes it does. And when it happens in small doses, in infrequent amounts, relative to something in particular, yes, it can be stressful. Yes, it can be tiring. Yes, you might be taken away from other things in your personal life you might like to do or need to do. Sometimes that happens in the working world or in the study world, and you need to have a strategy to work through them to still make sure that you care for yourself and you still get your basic needs met. But when this is imposed on you time and time and time again, particularly if it's not being rewarded with, pay for overtime or leave that you can take later on. But when we don't have the downtime, now, not everyone sleeps 8 hours a night, and as you age, you don't necessarily need 8 hours all of the time. But you need that rest, you need that shut-off time. And when you're not getting that, your body can go through changes, these biological changes, where the body doesn't shut down. So when we sleep, our mind categorizes all the things for the day and it files it away and we wake up fresh. If you're having dreams, if you're sleeping and you're waking and you're thinking about work, you're thinking about study, you're thinking about things, your body doesn't have that time to shut down. And all of the fluids and the tissues and all the stuff that makes your body up has that restful period where it gets to recharge and start again the next day. If you're not getting that rest, whatever that rest looks like, your body's not having that time to do that. And so time and time and time again, the body is placed under stress. This is where fatigue can happen. This is where colds and flus can happen. This is where accidents can happen. This is where anxiety, depression can happen. Usually these things are time and time and time and time and time again built up, but there are changes that happen in the body, and we don't want that. We don't want that for anyone. If someone's experiencing poor management, the number one factor for employees leaving a workplace is leaving because of a manager, not because of money, not because of location, not because of hours, not because of boredom. The number one reason people leave jobs is because of their manager. Now, not to say people also don't leave because of money or location or something, but that is the number one reason. Can we have a break soon? We certainly can. Can I get through this slide and I will sign us off there. Dangerous work conditions. You shouldn't be in dangerous work conditions, but if you are, you need to make yourself safe. Now, some jobs come with high dangers. People that climb telegraph poles to do electrical work, people that work on construction sites, they're there. But those industries should have safety plans in place and have practices in place to do things safely. And lastly, if someone has a fear of being fired, if they don't feel safe in their employment, that can cause stress. Okay.
Can't hear you.
Thank you, Cal. How
That's
about
okay.
now?
Yeah,
Better?
great. Heaps better.
Excellent. For those watching the video later on, we've just watched the little video that was included in our presentation. Why is that important? Well, national employment standards through Fair Work set out these 10 items. If you want to know about them front of mind, amazing. Know that your workplaces should and have included all of this information into their employment contract. So when you get employed, you will have weekly hours. You will have conversations around what flexible working arrangements are. What does parental leave look like in your organization? What does annual leave look like in your organization, and so on? Now, a lot of these are set across the board. Annual leave for most organizations is 4 weeks a year. Some offer 5, some offer 6, some offer 2 or 3. Very few offer in the lower range. And this will be prorated as well. So this is 4 weeks a year for 35 or 40 hours a week. If you work 20 hours a week, it'll be a little less. So if you feel that there is a breach in your working conditions, I recommend that you have a look at online, make phone calls to Fair Work, and check what's fair and just in your workplace. And go back to your contract. Whenever you start any role, be it casual, temporary, part-time, permanent, whatever it is, you will have a contract. And if you don't have a contract, I strongly recommend you get one before you start working. So you will come across challenging behaviors from your clients. Has anyone worked in hospitality or retail? No?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I'm an actual qualified cook, so
Oh, cool. Me
Yeah.
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you'd know exactly what I'm about to say then.
Yes, I'm sure you've seen these challenging behaviors.
For sure. I've
Yes.
never met an English. It's probably the worst profession I've ever worked in, actually.
It's not pleasant being a cook, being a chef.
No.
A lot of stress, a lot of cuts, a lot of burns, and a lot of being yelled at for stuff that I don't know what I'm being yelled at for.
Yeah, true.
And that's from the staff, let alone what the customers might complain about as well.
Yeah, I did aged care, and I loved the customers.
Yep.
I mean, the people I cared for. They were fantastic. It was more
Huh?
the management and people you worked with, like you just said, really. Yeah. But
Absolutely.
yeah.
So if you've worked in hospitality, if you've worked in retail, you've probably come across this. It's unfortunate to say, but you will come across it in the community services type work you will engage in. It's not okay. There are reasons for it if someone, most of the time there are reasons if someone is angry, upset, frustrated, and behaving this way. The behavior is not okay. I said earlier, it's okay to be angry, to have feelings, to be stressed, to be anxious, to be tired. When we're tired, our body hasn't probably slept properly, hasn't done all the restarting and the rebooting that it needs to do. So we're on all the time. And our brain is not quite functioning because it hasn't filed yesterday's stuff and it's still looking at stuff from a week ago. It needs to look at stuff from today and it's not there. So being stressed, being anxious, being tired is okay. But the behavior is not okay. So depending on where you work, you will come across some of these behaviors. I've worked in inpatient facilities, particularly with people withdrawing from substances and people experiencing severe and persistent mental health concerns. For those that are withdrawing from substances, they are withdrawing from something that has been in their body for probably a very long time. Maybe it wasn't their choice to withdraw, maybe it was, but there is a physiological reaction in the body. This substance or substances have been there and all of a sudden they're not there. And it's not just a slow decline unless someone has chosen to do this outside of a rehab facility. But when someone is in an inpatient unit withdrawing from substances, they've probably smoked and injected and taken everything possible the day before. This happens quite a lot, where you have this huge surge. So you get this huge high to try and last you as long as possible. But eventually the body will realize that there's no new substances coming in. So the body starts to figure itself out again and trying to figure it out. So people will feel angry and upset and scared, and their body is in that fight or flight response. And typically it's fight initially, and then later flight, where they, I guess, withdraw into themselves, become quite quiet, become quite isolated, don't want to see people, don't want to talk to people. That comes later. But initially it's this outward aggression. It could be in their body. It likely will be in their body. It'll likely be in their behaviors. Now, I never want you to be in a situation or put yourself in a situation or stay in a situation that is unsafe for you. That is, you are being yelled at. You are being threatened. You are being spoken to inappropriately. Someone is attempting to physically harm you by throwing something at you, grab you, something. Do not stay in these situations. If someone is verbally aggressive and you have the skills and the experience and you read the room where you can talk someone out of that by de-escalating the situation and that person, great. It is not something we've learnt so far. We will touch on it in the course. You will probably, hopefully, learn more about de-escalating techniques when you go into the workplace. So if you feel that a client is verbally aggressive and you can de-escalate the situation, you need to consider a lot of things in the moment. Okay. Aside from that, do not stay in that location. Move, get out, hit a duress alarm, call for help, whatever it is. Because it's never okay that behavior, and it's never okay for you to put yourself in that unsafe position. Or if you see a colleague in that position, don't put yourself in harm's way to try and help them, but where you can help them, calling out, yelling at, distracting something, then do that to help your colleagues. If you are physically harmed, make sure you seek medical attention. If you have been bitten or spat at, please get some blood tests done. Make sure you look after yourself if you've been physically harmed, as well as if you've been verbally harmed, because that's not fair and that's not right. And that can leave you feeling a bit shaken, a bit scared, a bit unsure, questioning what you're doing with your life and your work. Make sure you talk to someone and you seek treatment afterwards, whatever that might look like. Your clients will have challenging behaviors from time to time, depending on whatever they're going through. In the moment is not the time to talk about how they're feeling and think about our stress management plan. It is not the time. If someone is extremely heightened, it is not the time to talk about those things. After, yes. Why they got to where they got to, yes, after. In the moment, you're all about de-escalation techniques. You're all about trying to calm the situation and keep yourself and the client and anyone else safe. And like I said, those are different skills and techniques you touch on in this course. You probably learn, you might learn in your workplace. If you're interested, there's plenty more training that you could do in the space. So be prepared that this will happen to you depending on the environment you're in. I don't want you to walk around heightened and expecting it. I want you to be aware of your surroundings. Don't put yourself in a situation where it's only you and the client and the door is on the other side of the client and you have to go past the client to get to the door. Don't do that ever. Especially do not be in that situation when you are with a client that could potentially be upset, irate, aggressive. When you do home visits, when you do appointments in a room, be very mindful of where you sit because you might need to run, you might need to leave. So do not have the client in between you and the door, particularly when you know a client might become aggressive. So this is what you're going to think about after, when you are safe, when the client's safe. Is the behavior reoccurring? Do you see this as a pattern? Is it every Monday at 9 a.m. because they get their methadone, their substance treatment medication at 10 a.m. So at 9 a.m. is where they're at their heightened state of no treatment. Is it after a certain family member visits, after a certain family member makes a phone call to them? Is it when a certain worker is on shift? Is it when you wear a certain color? These might be patterns or identifiers or triggers for a client's behavior. Again, I'm not saying the behavior is okay, but afterwards you want to think about why is this behavior occurring? Because that's when we can start to look at, can I help the client make some change in this area? That's probably going to start with, hey, that behavior is not okay. And there are consequences for that behavior. Those consequences being kicked out of the facility, police turning up, arrests, charges. To prevent that, what's going on? What made you be that angry? What made you pick up the chair and throw it at the window? What made you do that? This is, again, more work and not all taught in this course when we look at thoughts and feelings that lead into behavior. This is a process that is very common in cognitive behavioral therapy, but these aren't hard to learn skills. They just take practice. So this is what you want to think about afterwards and talk to the client afterwards. What's going on? What led into that? If they say something like, well, it's you and your green jumper, right? And you go, okay. Well, I cannot wear a green jumper, if that makes you uncomfortable, but that is restricting my wardrobe. And I don't have endless jumpers, but I can try. But I'd like to work through, what is it about a green jumper that is upsetting to you? And you work through that. And maybe you don't wear the green jumper, but you cannot change your behavior. You cannot change your hair color. You cannot change your gender for a client. There are some things you cannot do. You can change what you say and what you do if it's relevant. So if a client says, I don't like the way you told me to hurry up and come for dinner. And you might say, okay, I recognize that I could have spoken to you better. I did want you to come to dinner and I was upset that you weren't listening, but I didn't need to get upset with you. So I will work on that for next time. And I apologize for raising my voice and being upset. But how can we work together so I don't have to call you 3 times for dinner? Or maybe the consequence is I leave it out and you come when you come. And if it's cold, it's cold. And then that might be it. But don't stay in an unsafe situation. Don't put yourself in an unsafe situation, and think about these things afterwards. And when you think about these things afterwards, they help you later on. So if you accidentally wear a green jumper to work and you go, oh crap, I put a green jumper on. And you ask all your colleagues, has anyone got a spare jumper? No, all right, I need to run home because John doesn't like green jumpers, and it'll really make him upset. But again, you're changing something, and then you're having to alter your life. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm saying get to the cause of things. So let's say if we know that John has a family member, Mary, coming to visit, then what can we do to help John work through that? Maybe Mary doesn't visit. Maybe we say to Mary, or we help John to say to Mary, hey, it's probably better if you don't visit right now while John is in this particular recovery stage. Or John has some coping mechanisms and techniques to have front of mind what he might say to Mary, how he might behave with Mary, how he might not take things to heart with what Mary says, how he might listen and put away what Mary says. Because Mary's saying and doing things that aren't helpful for John. And we can't control Mary. We could say to Mary, or John can say to Mary, hey, I don't like it when you say, or I don't like it when you do. But Mary has to be in control of changing that behavior or not. But we can help the client through that. Just like I spoke about before with the traffic, I can't change if that's going to happen, that's going to happen. But I can change my presence, my behavior in it. And we can help clients to understand this as well. Always talk to your supervisor. Always talk to colleagues, especially if they're more experienced, especially if you just need a debrief. And your organization should have scheduled debriefs or a debrief type of plan where you can have a reflection session or a session to talk about things that have come up. Work together with the client and anyone else involved to put certain plans in place. And make sure you feel safe and in control of the situation. It's not controlling other people. It's looking at your behavior, your response, and how you feel. Don't work with John again yet if you feel unsafe, but work through what that is. We can't always avoid situations. We can't always avoid people. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So if you can't, or it's not the best case of action, then what can we do to work through being around someone or in a particular situation? Grief and loss is another thing that you will experience in this work. Someone graduating from a program successfully might cause some grief for you because you've been working with them for maybe 12 weeks and you've wanted the best with them and you've seen them grow and change, and they leave because they've completed the program successfully. And you are happy for them, but you're also sad to see them go because you've built a relationship with them, and that's perfectly okay. And that means you care, but you have to find a way to work through that. and say to yourself, John has finished the program successfully. I am incredibly happy for him. I hope I never see him again because that means he's doing well. If he's not doing well, I hope he comes back and gets some help. But I wish him the best and I hope that he does well. And you move on because there are plenty more clients that you can help and work with. It's totally normal to become emotionally involved with clients. You are part of their world. You might be seeing them once a week. You might be seeing them 10 hours a week. You are part of their world and they're a part of your world, your professional world. Remember, you've got your boundaries. You close off for the day when you leave work. Or if you're working from home doing your case notes or something, when the computer gets logged off, that's it. You're done for the day. But it's okay to be emotionally involved. It happens. You are human. It happens. You want the best for people. But don't let it consume you and don't find yourself thinking about them 24/7 and don't let them be your only client. You will probably have a caseload of several clients and you need to pay attention to everyone, which is hard enough in itself, but you need to do that. You will not be trained in grief counseling from this course. You can go and get some further training if you like. You can get further training in everything. You can get further training in AOD and how to work with clients in the AOD space. But I recommend you speak to a grief counselor if you're experiencing some grief or loss because of a client, because of a situation, because of something in your personal life. Every human being experiences grief and loss to some level. Leaving high school is a loss. Leaving employment is a loss. Moving to another city, state, country is a loss. You don't have to focus on that loss. You could focus on the, but I'm gaining. I'm now living in the Maldives, sunning myself for 12 hours a day. Yeah, so we've won there. But there's still a loss to your home country and what life was like there. And that's okay. Everyone will experience grief and loss more than once and throughout their lifetime. But it's how you deal with it. It's important to acknowledge it, recognize it's there, go through whatever grieving process is needed safely for you and for other people, and legally for you and for other people. But recognize that that's a time of sorrow, of grieving, of sadness, maybe of excitement and apprehension as well. But recognize that process and seek out some counseling for yourself. Also recommend this to your clients who are going through a loss or experiencing grief in their lives. You can listen, you can empathize, you can offer some words of encouragement, but you should be offering support services elsewhere. You may not know of a grief counselor. You may not know of a grief support group, but you can find out, and you can find out with the client. So that's part of the support work as well. Sometimes we won't be the answer for everything for a client, but we support in making referrals or finding information for the client to call up and inquire for themselves. It's important to take your time off work. If you're given 4 weeks a year, you may not want to take 4 weeks in one block. You might want to take a week and then 2 weeks. You might think, hey, in 2026, I want to go to Europe for 3 months. And you go, okay, I'm saving my leave for there. You should talk to your manager around that's my plan because they have a quota to meet. So they don't want staff members with high work leave balances because that's a risk to the business. So you might talk to them around, hey, this is what I'm planning, but here's what I'm doing as well to take some time off to have some rest at the moment. And don't ignore grief and loss, and don't add to the stress by working more. That's not going to help. Ignoring it, trying to add more, it's not going to help. We're going to come back to this, but bear with me a moment and let me just find a quick video. These tools and strategies that we can look at in terms of recovering or managing or working through grief are applicable for ourselves when we might experience something, for our family members and friends, and also for our clients. Now, there may be boundaries or parameters of what you can and can't do. Maybe not every client is suitable to go on the boat with Daryl and go fishing. Maybe someone can't swim, and so maybe that's not the best option for them. But figure out what might be helpful for them. Not one thing, 10 things maybe. It doesn't matter. But help someone to think about, experience what would be helpful for them. Different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds have different ways to practice the loss of someone. As the video spoke about, there are different funeral rituals, and there are different rituals to do in someone's home with their family and so on. And different families and individuals will like a different burial style. It's very widespread, and an individual choice, a family choice, a culture choice, and that's okay. And not everyone will want to talk at all, let alone straight away, and that's okay. So if someone needs space, give them space. Say that you'll check in, as that woman described in the video. Say that you will be there when they're ready to talk. Now, remember, you have your off switch, so if you finish work at 5 or 5:30 or 7 p.m., that's when you finish work. But you're available to talk to them when they feel ready. If they want you to make some suggestions for support services to help with getting into a service, help them through that, help them with that. If you can be there with them doing the activity that's helpful for them, amazing. If you can be there journaling, if you can be there sitting at the sea, if you can be there kicking a football, catching the fish, going for a walk, great. Work within your boundaries and your physical abilities and your health and well-being and what you like. I've spoken about before getting out of your comfort zone. So don't go jumping out of a plane with someone. I wouldn't recommend that as the best thing to do with a client anyway, with a friend or family member. It's entirely up to you. But going for a walk, for the most part, is okay and is safe, as long as you are in a safe place. Sitting in nature, sitting in the park, sitting with someone, they do their journaling, you do your journaling. Don't share the thoughts, just sit there. That can be really beneficial for a person. And reiterating that grief and loss is often associated with a human being or a pet. And yes, those things happen. But grief and loss happens when we lose something, when we move away from something, particularly if it wasn't our choice, if we didn't have a say in it, if we didn't have control over it, if it happens suddenly. This is employment. This is relocating. This is your computer dying and you can't afford to get a new one. These are all things that can be an aspect of grief and loss. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And work through that. And if it's you, then make sure you ask for help from someone or someone's friends, family members, professional help. If it's your clients, remind them that you're there for them. You don't remind them 4 times a day, but you're there for that phone call, for that visit, for that support with them. Sometimes people just want someone to sit with them. No talking, just sitting. Beautiful. Great strategy. So that brings us to the end of our content, of our material for this evening. I'm going to go and stop the recording now.